Welcome to today's IREM webinar, Mastering Cost Management and Revenue Optimization with Income Expense IQ Benchmarks, which will be presented by our amazing panelists today, as well as our fabulous host, Todd Feist. My name is Jennifer Osborne, and I will be the moderator for this event. Couple of notes before we begin. Everyone has been placed on mute to avoid background noise. A PDF of the slides is available now for download from the course main page for this webinar. If you would like to ask the speaker a question, you can submit it at any time by clicking on the Q&A icon in the control panel. Questions will be answered at the end of the webinar. And now I'd like to welcome today's host, Todd Feist. Welcome to the program, everyone.
Thanks, Jen, and thanks everybody for joining us today. Our agenda for the webinar, we'll do some panelist introductions, and then we'll move to the panelist discussions where we look at some use cases for income and expense IQ and talk about income and expense trends. And we'll wrap up with your questions with the Q&A. Now, to introduce our panelists, I'm Todd Feist. I am a senior content developer with IREM headquarters in Chicago, and I'm pleased to be your moderator today. Matt, can you introduce yourself?
Sure, Matt Lexogray, pleasure to be here. I'm with Lobby CRE. We do the technology underlying the benchmark data, so we're aggregating all the data. And when folks come in to actually view the data, they're going to be viewing it in their platform, their Lobby CRE platform. Thanks for having me.
And Paula?
Hi there, I'm Paula Munger. I'm the Vice President of Research for the National Apartment Association. We're located just outside DC, and this just is one of many tools we provide for our owners and operators of apartment buildings across the country.
Thanks, Paula. Angela?
Hi, everyone. I'm Angela Ashelman. I'm currently the Senior Vice President of Property and Asset Management at the Misner Group. The Misner Group is a general contractor and developer, and then we have an entire portfolio of managed assets that we work with. And thank you for having me here.
Thank you, Angela. Will?
Yeah, my name is Will Curtis. I'm the Managing Director of Phyllis Browning Commercial. We are a local brokerage throughout the state of Texas, and also as well I have the privilege of being a faculty member for IREM as well.
Thanks, Will. Hakan?
Good afternoon, Todd. My name is Hakan Özsancak. I am the VP of Association Services and Publications at BOMA International. So I work closely with our local leaders, and as well as also focusing on our editorial coverage and our thought leadership as well. IEIQ is actually one of the products that I'm in charge with, working closely with our friends in IREM and NAA, of course. Looking forward to the conversation today.
Great. So we have some excellent panelists today, all with experience in real estate management, and they're eager to share their insights with you. So let's move on to the discussion. And we're going to start by talking about IEIQ through looking at some use cases. What is IEIQ? What better way to look at it than and answer that question than with some use cases? And Angela, you were going to tell us about how you've used IEIQ with zero-based budgeting. Can you tell us about that?
Absolutely. Any other managers that might be on this webinar may have experienced owner asking right away, hey, can you produce this budget? We're looking to underwrite this building. We need to know what the operational expenses are. And you're left holding your hands in the air. With this information and this tool and technology, you can literally go in and start plugging in your metropolitan area, what type of building, what size of building, and instantly get a budget formulated for your senior leadership or ownership. I find it fascinating and really useful.
Thanks, Angela. And Matt, you were going to tell us how you do this in the IEIQ platform.
Yeah, certainly. So just a visual of what this actually looks like as far as the output. But as Angela kind of mentioned, there's a couple filters that you'll use to select a market and then the asset class that you're looking for. We cover right now multifamily, office, and industrial. So those are the three asset classes. And again, if the data is available, we'll then display it. and have it available for you. You can dial in based off of parameters if you're looking at square footage or a unit to really dial in a little bit closer to your the asset that you're looking to kind of benchmark against. That helps you kind of pull that in. And then also from the submission side, if we have more information as far as class of building or maybe a high rise, or if it's multifamily, maybe garden style, those kind of parameters allow you to also kind of triangulate your asset a little bit more closely.
So some powerful data to help with that zero-based budgeting, help with multiple budgeting tasks. And let's take a look at another use case. And Will, you were going to tell us about how you use the IEIQ tools on a number of things in your business.
Yeah, I think the biggest one that I've used in the past is when I was in a role as an asset manager, where I've got a portfolio, across the country in markets that I may have been to for a matter of 6 hours before I flew back out. A lot of times in that asset management role, we really don't have a clue what's going on locally, and the IAQ gives us that opportunity to kind of sit down and while we have property managers that are on the ground that are building out, what those budgets may be, it also gives us opportunity to kind of benchmark those. As well, and come into the discussion with our local property managers who are the experts on the ground. It gives us the ability to kind of challenge and ask and make sure that those properties are running in the way that they likely could. Other ways, I've done quite a bit of consulting for operational consulting for properties, and this is usually one of the first places I start as well. Is okay, here's what you're built. Let's go and look at where we can benchmark this against everything else and figure out, again, are you there? Are you not? And then be able to explain why the property may be above or below. And there's certainly great reasons why it could be above or below based off of the way buildings operated or some of the comp sets that are in there. But to be able to sit down and explain those as well. And then kind of piggybacking on what Angela was saying, is that if you've got brokers or you're working with brokers that are going to in a market they're not used to working in, again, it gives you a great place to start, great place to sit down and work on it. And then even looking forward, usually the question we get asked, from an asset management side often is this projection going to look realistic in 3 or 5 or 10 years? And ultimately, we can use this tool to sit down and kind of look at, here's what the historical trends are. Here's where we think those trends are eventually going to go. And of course, the further out you get, the fuzzier that crystal ball becomes. But it does give you some data to really benchmark based off of what you're seeing like properties actually go, where most of the data out there that gets reported through other sources is really saying the market is seeing X, Y, and Z. And it's talking about the entire market, not diving into those garden apartments or those low-rise office buildings. And it gives you a little bit better accuracy to see where those properties likely will go in the future.
So this is powerful data to enable those conversations and get a baseline for where things should be. And Matt, how do you do what Will was talking about in the tool? And we're going to look at the property and MSA comparison.
Yeah, so there's a couple of different things, but to unpack this one particular item that Will reference was looking at a property and then comparing it to a market. So in this case, when you actually load that data into Lobby, you'll have in our first column the property level information. Once it's normalized into the same level of basically GL mappings, if you will, or the mappings that we're comparing apples to apples. So you'll have an MSA and then a property that'll be able to look at each other. So admin costs would be normalized, repairs and maintenance. And there's also within those, there are line items. So if you really want to get at utilities, you can look in at electricity and water, but we've kind of rolled it up here just so you can see a quick snapshot and comparison. But the idea being that you could then look at your asset and then look at the market and be able to say, okay, wait, where am I above? Where am I below? Okay, maybe I need to, dig in a little bit further into some of those areas to understand the variance and why, I might be higher or lower. And again, depending on the asset and maybe even some of your lease terms, right? Is it triple net, double net? All those things come into play here, certainly, but it's at least gives you an idea on where you can start and really start to understand, okay, where are some trends potentially going? And I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about kind of how the different team members here are utilizing some of that information.
Perfect. So, and Matt, you were going to continue here in the next portion of our webinar with kind of backing out, zooming out, and doing an overview of the IEIQ platform.
Yeah, so just talking about how do we even get the data? Because I think that's one thing that not everybody is 100% sure of. How does that data even show up? Where does this benchmark data come from? And the reality is it comes from the different organizations. So from IREM, from NAA, from BOMA, the members of these organizations are the ones that are submitting data here, right? So it's your peers at the end of the day. Your information is not being shared. We're not sharing the address, Main Street and Poplar Street. What we are sharing is what market are you in? So are you in Chicago? Are you in San Antonio? That's the data that is getting aggregated together again with all the other information. So it's in the sense that it's pulled together in one market. That's great. So it allows you to understand how everybody's doing relative to one another as far as where are these trends going? Are utilities higher? Utilities going down? Real estate taxes? All the admin costs, right? All of these things that you're trying to gauge against others. So the more folks that are submitting, the better and the more granular that data can become. There's someone shared this and it's true. It's analyzing or analytics. It's only as valuable as the underlying data, right? So the more data that is supplied by all of these folks that are submitting, which is great. We've seen it grow year over year as we've done it the last few years. The more submissions we have, the better that data is, right? The better that your benchmark is for your particular asset. So that's one item. And then as far as what is it that we're looking to pull together, we're looking to pull together a trailing 12 or 12 months of the prior year. So in our case, we're receiving data right now for January through December of 2023. So that's the data that's being submitted. What type of data, how easy or hard is it? Typically, we're seeing folks that are submitting that data through their property management system. There's a variety that are out there, but I'll just name a couple that are top of mind: the Yardis, the MRIs, the RealPage, the AppFolios, or some, right? If you have that information broken out by month, you can upload it into the platform and it'll get ingested. So in the past, a lot of folks found it cumbersome to input data into Excel. What we're saying is we don't need you to input anything. What we just want is your existing output, what you're currently using for those January through December of 2023. And you literally drag and drop it over and get it ingested. So that's what we're asking as far as effort. Tell us where the property is, what metro, give us the zip, total square footage, units, some of the other metrics, Class A, Class B, et cetera, and then let us ingest that data. As far as security, again, everyone has their data siloed. So we think about it like Chinese wall, like your information is in your account. So Matt's account is with Matt and other folks within his organization. We share that information. Angela's information is shared within her internal team. Will's data is shared within his internal team. And then again, we mask that so it's all anonymized. So nobody knows which properties are coming from which shop. And then we pull that together into the MSA and compare that across for everybody. So just to give everybody a quick overview on how that's done. So back to you, Tom.
And data has become so important to real estate management and will just continue to grow in importance. So the more data we get, as you mentioned, the more powerful this tool becomes. And can you just walk us through those exact dates for?
Yeah, absolutely. Great point. So one of the things that we do get questioned on all the time is, hey, look, my books don't close until really prior year, maybe April, May in some cases. So we like to extend that time frame for everybody to be able to submit, and we've extended it this year through June. And the idea being that what we'd like everybody to do is submit that data. And then what we will be doing is aggregating that data, maybe coming back to a couple folks. If we only see, for example, expense data being submitted, we want to see both income and expenses being submitted. So that way we have a true understanding of expense ratios, right? So again, through the end of June is what we're looking for. And then the idea of givers get. So the folks that are submitting, the folks that are giving get a free token. They get that data for that asset class. So if I'm submitting office data, if I submit just one, or if I submit 50, you still get the office market data for the national data. So that's awesome. Folks are amazed. And it's a great way to also kind of expand your footprint, right? When Will mentioned that he's in some markets for 6 hours. Okay, you know what? You don't have to be an expert, but you can get a flavor for that market by using some of this information to understand where are things. And then you can really understand it, dig deeper if needed.
Great. And anybody that is ready to do that, you can reach the Income and Expense IQ platform by going to IRM.org, navigating to tools in that horizontal menu at the top, and then selecting Income and Expense IQ, and you'll find the buttons on this page to do that. And then you can also enter that URL right there on the screen. So we welcome your submissions. So we talked about some use cases for IEIQ, and then Matt gave an overview of the tool. And now let's talk about what's going on in the market, and because ultimately this is what the tool is about. What's going on in the market? How does it compare to those industry benchmarks, and what's going on in your properties? And let's talk first about where costs are going up. And Will, what have you seen in your in San Antonio, where your business is?
Yeah, so I think one of the things, and we kind of, as we kind of were prepping for this call, everybody kind of shook their head. Insurance, I think, is the one that's kind of crazy for the vast majority of us, right? You know, Texas, you know, we're a vastly large state, you know, mountains and coastline. Hurricanes have been kind of rough on our Gulf Coast area. Right now, we got wildfires and stuff like that in the northern portion of the state. You know, there's a lot going on when it comes to natural disasters and what have you. And because of all that, we're seeing increases in insurance costs, where we're even seeing some insurance providers talk about maybe exiting Texas. I know we've seen that in California and some other markets as well. And some of the discussions happening here in Texas as well. So for us, that's one of the things that I think we're watching, and we're trying to predict as best as we can. The other thing we're seeing as well is we're looking at water, and we're seeing water costs are starting to go up. You know, Texas has historically been all right with water. We're kind of looking at the next handful of years that we may start seeing something we typically see more in the western parts of the country, where we may have a little more water restrictions. We may have some other things going on where you know, water and conservation of water is becoming much more important to us. And of course, because of that, we're seeing those costs on water start to increase a little bit more as well.
And Angela, does that sound familiar to you, or is something different going on with costs in your market?
Insurance, yes, absolutely. We acquire assets to put them into the portfolio, and we're utilizing this tool to help stay competitive. You know, our ownership and investors don't want us to have additional recoveries across the portfolio that makes the whole rent higher. So, you know, we can compare our budget to other competitors to make sure that we're in line. We did find in our most recent acquisition that some insurances are being excluded, like wind and hail used to be covered under insurance policies, and now they're carving that out as a whole separate policy. So, you know, understanding your expenses and being able to communicate to the tenant who is new to you in your portfolio, what are those costs, is important. Additionally, I will say that, you know, water in our portfolio is actually going down because we have utilized smart meters. And, you know, think about, when you look at this data, what's different on your site versus what might be different in the mainstream. You know, are you implementing something that is unique to your portfolio that you can't really compare against? Because you don't want to just up your budget number for water if you actually are getting some savings.
Great. And Hakan, what are you hearing from BOMA members about costs?
Yeah, we are hearing similar things from what Will and Angela have mentioned. You know, we actually have a piece that just came out that we're going to be putting out in our newsletters on hardening assets, kind of like what, in line with what Will was mentioning about kind of like natural disasters and everything else. We know we have hurricane season coming up. You know, the office industry, as you know, in general, is struggling depending on certain markets, and so there's a shift to industrial, medical, other areas as well. So that's why we think with these kind of costs going up, being able to kind of better control it and align it with OpEx, that's why we think IEIQ is such a good tool to be able to use for people to be able to run more efficient buildings as well, and smarter buildings as well, because I'm also in charge of our building recognition programs, where we are offering different products as well. But the most important thing is how do we actually make sure that our building owners and managers can actually run more effective and efficient buildings. And again, we think the IEIQ is a really good tool to be able to support them as well, and our members.
And Paula, how about your members with multifamily communities?
Yeah, I'll be echoing everyone before me, but insurance is definitely an issue. It has been for a while, and we're always asked as an organization that provides tools to help them understand why, help them understand which markets we're seeing these increases more than in other markets, which IEIQ helps with. The one thing that's good is we're starting to see some of the inflationary pressures come down, but there's still increases in property taxes depending on which market you are, but that's pretty widespread as well. And definitely personnel costs. I mean, it's still an employees market, even though that's softening a bit, but we are seeing personnel costs continue to increase year after year from our members.
And everybody mentioned insurance costs, and here's what our panelists are talking about. This chart was created using IEIQ data 2020 to 2022, and you'll see the rise in per unit costs for multifamily communities from that time period in these different markets. And if you do the calculations, it's an 115% increase in Miami, 98% in Charlotte, 61% in Houston, and 51% in Tampa. So insurance costs, everybody's talking about them, and this is why. And we'll be keeping tabs on that, and that's something you can do with IEIQ too. Now let's move to revenue. And we'll start with you. How are rents in your markets? And where are the revenue opportunities?
Yeah, so I think the one thing to keep in mind is each product type is going through their own product cycle, right? You know, what's happening in multifamily is not what's happening in office or industrial. I would say generally what, the kind of Texas markets, we've been blessed in the fact that we've had a lot of net migration coming into the state. We've seen growth in the state over and over and over, which ultimately increases demand. And overall, we're seeing rents on a total increasing. Now, office is the one that's probably a little softer than most, and those rents, while they may not be increasing, what we have been seeing is many general office users or landlords, sit down and are keeping stated rents generally the same, but they're making up for it in basically free rent and TI and those concessions. And ultimately, it's an attempt to try to keep those values as high as they possibly can, but maybe shortchange the short-term cash flow that's going on as well, which, IEIQ is going to help us figure that out and see what's going on, because we're going to see what the actuals are versus what those stated rents are actually going to end up being. As for revenue opportunities, I mean, I think, most of us that are in the operations side of real estate, we're looking at our properties to see where can we find unique opportunities to find additional revenue. Is there places where maybe there's some services we're not doing? Maybe there's some additional rental opportunities that we're not seeing, some vacant space that's not being utilized to its fullest. I know, through the pandemic, we saw a lot of folks that were looking at, especially in the multifamily world, we're looking at, having workspaces that are outside of their space, but you could rent to be part of the concessions or part of the day room or those kind of things that were in there, and just getting really creative to find more value, to bring in more dollars through a lot of different opportunities. It's really sitting down and being entrepreneurial and really kind of thinking, which, sometimes is a little outside of the box for most property managers. They're used to running a tight ship. But I think that's where, that's that pressure on many of us that's in that operations field is thinking a little more entrepreneurial and figuring out where we can dive in and find those additional revenue opportunities to help make up for the inflationary factors that have kind of hurt landlords' returns.
Angela, how about you? What are you seeing with revenue?
So our product type is predominantly industrial, and our rents have been raising and raising because it's hard to find the space. We also develop in that product type, and we've been very successful in leasing new developed space. What I've seen is that the concession package, may only include base rent when they first come to the building rather than all rents. So we've had many leases where the abatement was only base rent and they kicked off additional rents right away. So you could have concession for base rent for 6 months, but pay additionals immediately. I love all that Will said of being creative. It actually made me think of a couple things when he was speaking, like a conference room at one single office building that we haven't monetized. Maybe there's a way to do that. But throughout the portfolio that is predominantly industrial, what we have been doing to create more revenue opportunities is how can we integrate into renewal leases and new leases, maybe some green lease language where if the municipality requires benchmarking or if there's native planting that's required, can we pass that back to the tenants? And we want to be able to look at new ESG opportunities, not in a big way, but in small ways. You know, could we put a bike rack out there and can we pass that back through to the tenants? You know, how can we do this without impacting the cash flow to the ownership, but being a benefit to the tenant?
Great. And Hakan, what are your members saying about revenue?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, I have to echo what Angela just said about those revenue opportunities. Amenities is a big space that we're looking into, really expanding that. We kind of call it the 20-minute city here quite a bit, you know, in Bomalingo as well. We just see that more and more happening. Offices here in the DC area as well. You know, they're renting out a lot of places, even like allowing others to come in and use their gyms. So I just think thinking outside the box and being creative is really important. I like what Angela also mentioned about ESG and sustainability as well, like the bike racks that she just mentioned. We're seeing that a lot in our industrial folks. I mean, not everyone is able to kind of do that, right? And so I think just thinking outside the box and sometimes being more open, but also kind of being reactive as well to like what our members' needs are. That's kind of been the approach that we've been taking as well, kind of looking at it from a national perspective.
And Paula, how about you?
Yeah, so multifamily, as a lot of you know, is right now having some of the highest supply added in 4 decades. So we're actually seeing rent softness in some of those markets that have the excess supply. But generally speaking, there's plenty of markets. We had a really solid started off with a good leasing season this spring. Rents are rising, not by the record-breaking levels of 2021 and below norm, but still in most places rents are starting to rise a bit year over year. And in terms of revenue opportunities, I mean, just echoing, really thinking outside the box, and a lot of our members are focusing more on providing services, in addition to as part of the experience of being in that community. So residents are willing to pay for convenience. And when you have a service that a resident can opt in or out of at their choice, they are telling you that this convenience is important to me. So we're seeing members who partner with local businesses, for instance, like a restaurant or a coffee shop, to bring some sort of a food truck or some sort of event. And then they share that revenue with that business. So it's a win-win for the community. And then other things like partnering with short-term rental providers, sectioning off a floor in a property for short-term rentals, and related to that, having guest suites in properties. So, you're growing in your space, you just had a baby, but you want your mom to come help you out. You can find an apartment on another floor that the grandparents can stay in. So things like that. And then, of course, just traditional things like parking, pets, all of those things can help drive revenue a little higher.
Thank you, Paula. And next we're going to talk about with Hakan and Paula about how their members use IEIQ, and IREM and BOMA and NAA have this wonderful partnership around this tool. And Hakan, how do you see your members using the tool?
Yeah, I think what Matt mentioned earlier on, right? Like being able to just do this and then access that information. And he said, like, whether you do 1 or 20 or 50, I think that's been like the most important tool in the toolbox here that our members use. Because last week I was meeting with some of our local leaders in Wisconsin and Chicago and suburban Chicago, and that's something that really came up as well. Like how much they enjoy having me able to have that kind of access to the information to then also be able to go out and reach out. Because at the end of the day, our local leaders are not the ones that are plugging in to do this. It's our members who are doing it. So I think it's a win-win approach that we like to take with them.
And Paula, how about you? What are you hearing from your members?
Yeah, and for us, and just echoing what Will said earlier, this is just a tool you can't be without if you're an asset manager or even a regional property manager in the multifamily space, because you can't be everywhere at once. So really being able to go into to compare again throughout your portfolio as well as at the MSA level, like properties, that's been key. And we also, as an out of the box kind of use, we see some of our members, particularly those that are active in their communities and with their local legislators, using this data to educate policymakers. This is a very thin margin business. It's often portrayed as the big landlord who's making money hand over fist, and that's not the case. We have a lot of smaller members. A lot of them, like I mentioned, are very active, and they use these data to show how their costs are going up. Like that chart you showed on insurance is something that one of our members would turn around and take into one of their local legislators and say, this is what we're facing. This is why rents are rising, because we're trying to keep up with these rising costs. So that's been a key use for IEIQ as well.
That's great. Such a creative way to use this data. And so before we turn to attendee questions, can you each give us a key takeaway from what we discussed today? And Hakan, can you start with your key takeaway?
Yeah, I mean, look, all in all, so BOMA had a long history of doing the EER, the Employee Exchange Report. It was like over 100 years. We got rid of it during COVID, and then when this opportunity came up to join forces with IREM and NAA, we opened it. We welcomed it with open arms. Look, it's a really good tool on OpEx, running better buildings, just having benchmarking at your forefront, but also just having a dashboard. We all love a good dashboard. So just to be able to look at it and run more efficient buildings, more sustainable buildings. In our case, sometimes that's something that we're emphasizing. I think Angela mentioned that as well. I think that's the key takeaway. It makes you run buildings more efficiently. We have more data. We're all wanting to analyze data more. Someone mentioned, I think Matt, Todd, one of you did earlier. So that would be my key takeaway. It's a really good tool in the toolbox to be able to kind of really look into your OpEx and all your other expenses in one place. And thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. And Paula, what's your key takeaway?
Yeah, so similar to Hakan, we had what we called our income and operating expenses survey. Since the 90s, it was paper for a very long time, and then we got fancy and moved to CDs, and then we used to distribute it via a jump drive. And then so when this opportunity came up to really enhance the product, modernize the product with IREM and Lobby, we jumped on it as well. And to me, this product and the data, I've been working in real estate data in one form or another for over 30 years, and this data just keeps getting better every year. So for me, and like we said earlier, data, you get out of it what you put into it. So if anyone who's watching this webinar, either right now or a few days from now, really consider submitting your properties because you will be thrilled with what you're getting back.
Matt, what's your key takeaway?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm just going to be echoing what everybody says, but I will say that, again, this idea of the folks that are a part of these organizations are here, and oftentimes we're lifting one another up, right? We all have relationships. We meet each other at different conferences, and there's a lot of crossing of ideas and sharing of different information, best practices, right? And this is an opportunity to do that. And again, everybody's data gets better, the more folks participate. So givers get, the more that you can give, the better off you are, the more precise you can be in the work that you're doing. And oftentimes I think, that 80-20 principle, 80% of most of these folks are like, hey, my portfolio is great, but it's that 20 that they're really trying to hone in on. So this just gives you another tool, another component to how you're analyzing things to really help you really refine how to operate a business. So that's the goal, right? I think, and it's great to see the participation across the orgs that are saying, okay, we can do this in isolation, or we can come together. And again, just like the industry, the real estate industry, let's get better together and start really adopting technology and data, right? To get better. We're seeing it across healthcare. We're seeing it across insurance. We're seeing it all throughout different industries. Data is being utilized. And it's really great to see real estate adopting data and saying, okay, look, we can utilize this to be more efficient, and not just, I love Excel, but not just live in Excel, but start utilizing something broader that we can all get better from. So that's kind of what I'm seeing and hearing from folks. So it's great to see.
Great. And Angela.
So I have a couple different key takeaways. I, like others on this group, I utilized a book called Dollars and Cents when I managed retail with a REIT. And as a leader, I'm reminded in my mind what I had to do as a manager. I had to submit any renewal documentation to senior leadership with the dollars and cents report on it. I had to, when I was negotiating any options, I had to look at the dollars and cents. I had to look at it for budgeting. So I think that there are use cases for this data beyond just the things that we talked about, on this webinar. And then, things that Will mentioned and others about what you can do creatively in Paula, the services that are offered, even on industrial and office. I think that's a key takeaway for people to look at this in a different way. What can be offered at the site level that isn't being done?
Great. And yes, anybody who's using the data in a creative way, please do share. Be great to hear about it and just share with others how to use the data. And Will, what's your key takeaway?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I took away was really a comment that Angela made, and she said that, it's all about those small changes and finding those small incremental changes. And I think, a lot of times, especially we're, staring down an owner or staring down a senior property or a regional manager or whatever the case happens to be, and we're trying to figure out what we can do and how we can get things going on. We're thinking, how can I slash this by 15 or 20%? But it really is those small incremental changes. It's a 2% savings here, and it's an additional 1% income over there. And it's really those small things that we can sit down and use, the IEIQ to sit down and look at and say, okay, maybe I need to adjust this one because I'm over market from where this is. What small changes can I make? And those small changes, can absolutely have huge impacts on the value of a property, and ultimately meet our owner's goal is just by making those small changes and using tools like this to help us figure out where to identify where those small changes really should be made.
Great. And thank you all for sharing your insights and for those excellent key takeaways. Now's the part of the webinar where we are delighted to take your questions. Jen, have we had any questions come in?
Thanks, Todd. Yes, we've actually had a couple questions come in. Let's start with this one. For us who have joined a bit late, can you clarify if this is an actual platform? If so, what is the platform called? And where is the building information going to be entered?
Matt, can you take that question?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So I'll break it up into a couple pieces. I think we had a slide earlier about how to access signing up for the platform through IREM. So there's a whole link, there's a whole process that you can do. So in IREM, you can actually click through and it'll bring you to a landing page. And yes, it is a distinct platform. It's called Lobby CRE. So you have your information is stored in one area for your firm. All your data, your details, really granular information is stored there. And then we aggregate that together on the back end. So none of your information outside of the zip code, square footage, class of the property is shared, and then the financials are all aggregated together. And so you'll have a login, you'll be able to have as many users as you want. So you can have 1, you can have 15 in an organization, 20, whatever that is, that are there to be able to view and compare that data.
Great. All right. The next question is, when I try to log into lobby.cre, It says my company already exists and won't let me register. How do we access our company's account to upload the information?
Great question. If you want to shoot a quick email at support@lobbycre.com, we can figure out who in your organization has that account and then put you guys in touch. So sometimes we'll see that where someone's excited to submit, but there's already folks within that firm that have either submitted in the past or created an account. So instead of creating 5 different accounts, ideally we have one where the folks can all work together to supply and then also to view that data. So again, that's support@LOBBYCRE.com. Just shoot a note over there, and one of the team here at Lobby will help you out.
All
Great
right,
question.
we have one that's just coming in right now. Second here. And how do we sign up for Lobby CRE? Do we have to submit that through the main IREM IEIQ page, beginning a benchmarking?
Yeah, so how do we create an account? That's the best way to go about it, is to go through that link, so that way we know where you're associated, like how you're associated with the platform. That also allows you to kind of skinny down the platform a little bit to just reflect the information that's available for the benchmark. So you're not clicking on stuff that's not related to what the benchmark is. So that would be my suggestion. Again, if there are further questions, you can always shoot a note to support@lobbycre.com. And we can, if we need to jump on a quick call to answer a very specific question that maybe I'm not doing justice to, feel free to reach out and we're happy to respond to that.
And if
All
I may
right.
just add to that, I mean, naturally at BOMA, we have our own landing page, and
Yeah.
on BOMA.org, we have an ability for our members to go in directly and do that. I'm sure NAA does something similar as well. Just FYI to anyone out there who's listening or will listen later from BOMA as well. We have that, of course, on the landing page too. It's a very collaborative effort, for the record.
Wonderful. Okay, the next question is, can you please repeat the timeline each year for data submissions and when the new benchmarks will be available annually? What time period do the new benchmarks cover each year?
Sweet. Yeah, good question. I can jump on that one. I feel like I'm just going, they're lining them up for me. I love it. So when can I submit data? So basically we open this up in February each year. So really what we look for from everyone is support to submit a full year of financials, right? So typically there's some level of the books get closed in February or March of the following year for that prior year. So that's typically when we start seeing March, April, May is when the big submissions come in, but we've actually extended it a little bit because we know people have a day job and we want to give people as much time as possible. So we've got this through the end of June for the submission of the data. And again, that's really straightforward. We talked about it earlier. It's basically your property management system, a trailing 12 each month. You literally can drag and drop it as long as it's in a format we support, and then we'll read that data in. So then when is it get processed? So that really is the month of July. We're taking to process that data, and then we'll turn around a benchmark for everybody in August. So June is our deadline. July is the processing kind of dead time, if you will. Sometimes there's a couple questions that we'll reach out to folks on if there's something in their data that seems a little out of whack, and then we'll try to kind of stamp our final approval for the data in August.
Great. The next question that just came in, does BOMA and IREM
Hot off the presses. Keep them
hot
coming.
off the presses? Does BOMA and IREM share data, or should we submit on each platform?
Oh, that's a really good question. And I see someone unmuting, so jump in here.
Yeah, I mean, we do have quite a few people who are members for both IREM and BOMA. But yeah, I mean, I think, again, this is a very collaborative effort. At the end of the day, we all work on this together. But naturally, if you're a BOMA member, would love for you to enter it into BOMA. It's probably healthy competition. IREM friends, you would probably agree with that as well. But again, it's a very collaborative approach. I mean, it's not like, one is better than the other, but just, naturally would like to get our numbers going. And that's what we do with our local leaders as well, just for them to encourage their members to enter it as BOMA members too.
What's
That's
the
all I
most
can say.
important is that we get the most information in the platform so everybody wins.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Yeah,
I'll
and to
I'll
clarify,
add one
you
note.
don't, oh, I was just gonna say to clarify, you don't have to submit it twice. So
Thank you.
we
That's
don't want to- yeah, yeah.
perfect.
And
Perfect.
as Angela just said, you know, we're happy to take submissions from wherever you start your that first step.
Great. All right. Another hot off the press. If I have submitted my data, how will I know if it's been approved and in the correct format? The portal says mine was canceled.
Yeah, great question. I can answer that. So the data that we ingest, and if it's reading canceled, I'm working on that data right now that's pulled in through upload, like this drag and drop process is marked as canceled. That really needs to be marked as like ingested. What we also have a process that reads emailed in reports, and that process has been updated. So I've got to get the process for anything that's been drag and dropped in to be read. So what we do is we ingest the data, and then really over the next month, the team on our side is going to go through and review the data, and we'll reach back out if there's for some reason something that does not look correct in the data. Sometimes what we'll see is the most often cases, someone will only submit expense data and not submit income for some reason. So that's oftentimes we'll reach out and just say, hey, like, thanks so much. We noticed that you submitted data that was just expenses. If it's in a format that we can ingest, let's just say you use a property management system, QuickBooks might be one, for example, that we don't currently have a format that ingests, just reach out to us. We'll still take that data and then we'll just put it into basically a template on our side that we can ingest. So our team, by and large, will be able to help you with that. But great question. You want to know, did this data get processed? Am I good to go? If there's a question and you're still like have any sort of concern, feel free to reach out and our team can reach right back to you and let you know where we are, if it's still yet to be mapped, or if there's anything wrong, we're happy to do that. Again, that last probably 4 to 5 weeks is when we spend a lot of time looking and reviewing, making sure all the submissions are in good shape.
Great. All right. This may be more of a, again, what team question. I'm going to take two questions and mesh them more into one. Have not been able to register via BOMA or IREM site, getting the same error message on Lobby CRE platform. Second question being, how are we registering if the initial Lobby CRE page is not allowing due to already being registered?
Yeah, so that will happen. Let's just say someone created an account, Matt Lexo Gray Capital, and then there's another user that goes to create an account. That sounds to me like what that error is. So it's going to say, nope, can't create an account generally because that account has already been created. So what we don't ship you off. We don't say, hey, contact Bob or contact Sue. But in that case, just reach out to support at Lobby CRE and we'll put you in touch. If it's already been created and we can clearly identify that you're part of that org, cool, we can add you, right? But if there's someone we need to put you in touch with at that org, we're happy to do that as well so that they can add you. So it's really, it sounds like that one's a good question around how do we get that person into the right account? And if it's a question maybe of a password reset, there's an ability to reset a password. Again, still having a hard time with it, just reach out. We're happy to help.
And again, that was at support@lobby.cre that really they can help at that.
Yeah, lobbycre.com. That's right. That's support at lobbycre.com is where you can reach out.
There you go. All right. Next question we've got. Are we able to submit data directly from our property management software?
Good question. Yeah, so most of the property management systems have the ability to schedule data. So you can schedule it to yourself to receive it weekly or monthly. We do have some folks that will schedule their annual data to be sent into Lobby, so they don't actually have to really do any further submission. So if that's something, again, just that's a good one for us to just schedule a quick call to review which property management system you have and then where to send it. So if you want to go through that, that's a great one to do. And we do have some folks that are looking to do that with the platform.
Wonderful. We had just enough time for one more question for the day. What if our company's chart of accounts doesn't exactly match the platform?
Yeah, so that's happens every single time somebody submits data, right? There's never going to be one that matches 100%. So what we have probably 10 to 15 income categories and about 45 expense categories that we have everything mapped into. A great example is being repairs and maintenance, right? There's lots of line items, and we're trying to just bring those into categories that are similar. So there may be instances, and you can see this in your platform, where we've mapped them. There's nothing hidden about how we map, but a lot of times we have an automation that's going to look at it. And then we're also going to review it to make sure that we're not including any CapEx items as operating expenses. So we try to make sure that those are below the line. Sometimes folks submit, for some reason, debt service or depreciation and amortization above the line just because of the way maybe their financials were submitted. So we're always trying to exclude that, so we have apples to apples comparison. So that's typically what we're doing on our side. But again, you have the ability to view that in the platform. If you want to make a tweak or change something, you certainly can. As far as maybe it's an admin expense that for some reason looks like we've got it grouped into some category like other operating expense other, because it's very unclear to us just by the naming convention that it is an admin expense.
Wonderful. We have one quick question that just stuck in, and it's a good one. If we've acquired properties late in the year and do not have 12 months of data, do you still want it submitted?
Yeah, excellent question. My 2 cents on this is you're going to set yourself up for success by submitting that, creating the property, submitting the data. What we are aggregating together, just so everybody's clear on the back end, is we're aggregating that data together on a monthly basis, right? So there's each month we're able to aggregate that information together. So I would definitely recommend it. And again, if there's something for some reason that's really out of whack, where there's income and expenses are really out of line, as we're going through and kind of culling through the data, we also look for that. So if there are some kind of anomalies, those will not include, because we don't want to throw off the numbers across the board. But we are happy to get that. And ideally next year, when you have that property, if it's owned or managed, it'll have a full year, so that we'll be able to add it in the following year. So it's easier to set yourself up for success going forward. Just add it to the platform. And again, if we have questions or concerns, we can always have a quick follow-up discussion.
Perfect. Great.
That felt like a Final Jeopardy answer there. How'd we do?
Hey, we did perfectly. It was wonderful. All right. And that does wrap up our Q&A for the day. And before we conclude, I'd like to mention that IREM has other relevant resources and courses available at irem.org. We'd appreciate your feedback on this webinar. You can access the brief evaluation on the course main page for this webinar. Please complete the evaluation so we can continue to provide quality, relevant content to you. If you have any other questions, please feel free to send them to me at webinars@irem.org. This concludes our webinar. Thank you so much to all of our fabulous hosts and panelists today. And thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful day, everyone.